And here we are. It seems like Saturday is here before you know it. Good to see you, Mary.
Good to see you too, John. Hey, everybody.
Hey, everyone. I see Michelle down there and Joanna and Fred. Good to see y'all. Thank you for coming today. Joanna, I'm glad that you were able to watch the movie. I watched it last night and again this morning just so I could be up on it. And I like these movie episodes that we do because I just feel like I'm just going to talk about a movie with friends. It's
Yeah,
like it's not nothing more than that.
I love
But
talking about movies with friends.
yeah,
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 it's a lot of fun. So, and this was a really good movie. I was telling Mary before we started recording, before came on that, and I think I mentioned this last time that this movie came out in 1988, and it came out right at the time that I was getting sober, and I'm pretty sure I was about in my first 30 days when I saw this movie, and it made such an impression on me. I don't even know what I was thinking at the time, but it was one of those movies when I watched it for the first time back at that time. It was all feeling. It was just it was what I was feeling, and not so much what I was thinking because the movie the character in the movie was going his life was in such turmoil and so was mine at the time. So it just had that, it's some good memories about that.
I think they did a great job showing what it feels like to be in that kind of unmanageability and to
Yeah.
in that addictive loop
Yeah.
and the chaos surrounds it, and then the how hard it is getting sober. I think they
Mm,
did a good job of showing that in a really good raw way, and Michael Keaton really nailed it.
he really did.
Yeah.
So let's go through the movie. So it starts. There's a scene where he wakes up with a girl, and he starts snorting coke first thing in the morning, and turns around and she's not moving. And so they get an ambulance and they take her away, and the cops are there with him and kind of give him a scare. The cop has an idea that he's got drugs there somewhere and told him that you better hope she doesn't die. So he had that hanging over his head in the beginning. Plus, I don't remember when we learned this, Mary, but he embezzled a bunch of money from his employer.
I
So he
think we
had
learned
that.
yeah, we learned that even before we learned about the girl, I think. I
Okay.
He was on the phone with his brother or
Yeah.
somebody, or maybe that same morning that that's what woke him up was a phone call, and
Right.
she was
That's
in the
right.
bed, yeah,
That's right.
and
That's
that
right.
someone was accusing
Yep.
him of, like, "Where's the money?" And
Exactly.
he was saying, "Oh, it's there. It'll be there Monday. Look, just look. You didn't look in the right place."
Right.
So we know
Right.
that money's missing, and
Yeah.
someone thinks he took it.
Yeah. And it just shows you, it's I'm just so grateful. I don't know what it is, but the last several times that we've been doing these live streams, I just keep thinking that God, I don't ever want to go back through that stuff again. I'm so grateful that I'm sober and that I've
Yeah,
been sober.
yeah.
And these movies are kind of a good reminder of that, I guess. But yeah, his life fell completely apart, but he was still trying to get things under control on his own,
Yeah.
thinking that, he would be able to manage things out. So he lied his way through things, lied to
He was a
everybody.
really good liar. I mean,
Hmm.
but we could tell he was lying, but, I mean, I think to the outside world, I don't know if he was really fooling anyone, but
Yeah.
the way he, as an actor, portrayed his role was amazing. He was very manic and smoking a lot of cigarettes, and he could talk and smoke really quickly, and it really gave you the feeling of, he was a coke addict and also probably an alcoholic, and,
Yeah.
it showed him using all that and how he was when he was using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of new people coming in. John, Neil, Tony, Bree. And if I missed anyone, I'm sorry, but thanks for coming in. We got 13 people in the room. So nice to have you all here. So yeah, I re so I just relate to this character. So he starts off, he has this traumatic thing happen because of his use, and immediately starts lying to cover it up. And that's exactly what I did. So I immediately start lying to everybody to cover it up. And, you know, and I wasn't proud of that. And there was a scene in there too, Mary, where that I almost cringed when he was trying to get his parents to bail him
Oh
out of that
god.
problem.
Yes. Horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah, as he got further into it, he had to steel himself up for it, and then he goes to
right.
his parents' he asked them on the phone,
Hmm.
to mortgage their house that he needed a loan, and I guess that's how he was trying to figure out how to return the money.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just how desperate we get. I'm for, I didn't have that kind of money. I didn't steal money. I didn't have his type of a job or anything, but I was completely down and out, and looking at going to jail. And my first thing when I had his situation where I woke up in jail basically, and my immediate supervisor got me out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he got me out of jail and he left. And I walked out of jail looking for my car. And that was my first day of sobriety, looking for my
Wow.
car, figuring out where it was. And that's the day I called AA, when I finally got to my house. But I made up a lie to my employer to explain why I wasn't there that day. And my supervisor went along with that lie. And that's how I freaking lived my life at the time. It was always just one lie after another to get out of these problems. And just like Daryl, they came to me pretty quickly, and I don't know. I'm so glad I don't have to live that way anymore. But that was definitely the life that I lived.
Yeah.
And all of that starts falling apart. Eventually my lies caught up with me, and the truth, and they found out the truth. And the same thing happened to Daryl later on in the movie. And I'm probably going to jump ahead a lot, but there was that scene when he's in treatment for a while. He gets out and he goes to his employer, and he does a really bad job of trying to make amends, right, for the money that he stole.
Mhm.
And he's just lying again.
Yeah.
He's the first, all he can do is think up lies to tell them. But the truth comes out. They said, Daryl, you stole the money, didn't you?
Mhm.
You know, and
Yeah.
it was up, and he
Yeah.
lost his job.
Yeah. And the thing I thought was that all he was doing was trying to, like, control everyone in his environment, and just like he spent all of his energy trying to control people to stay off his back so he could get back to doing what he wanted. And even when he first got into rehab, snuck in the office to make phone calls to his dealer. He only went to rehab to escape the police.
Exactly.
And he was
Yeah.
still, the minute he got in there, his whole thing was like he was managing that police problem.
Yep.
So he went to
Because
rehab for that. Yeah.
initially he was trying to get to Canada, but he didn't have any money.
Right. He
Yeah, he's
didn't have
trying to
any
get
money and he
a
couldn't.
plane.
Well, yeah. So he's at the airport and has no money and they won't take his credit card.
Yeah.
And
So
he
he
hurts. Yeah.
decides he decides he's going to go to rehab, and he starts drinking a bunch of beer because they thought he had to be drunk or whatever to get in there. So
And he also had insurance, so it would pay for it. And
right.
he could hide out for 3 weeks.
Yep. He wanted to make sure that nobody would find him. So there's some good comments here. Tony says the cause of my own individual suffering internally, events, just the effect, irrelevant now. Yeah. So most of the suffering was because of internal things, not necessarily external things. That's probably true with me too. And then Joanna says, personally, I don't think an employer needs to know if you're out of the office due to alcohol use or treatment. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
point.
well, no, that is a good point. That
You
is a good
know, I think we may have come a long way with that. I mean, uh, um, I I think that my employer, I don't that we don't talk so much about this, but there's about addiction itself and getting treatment for addiction if you're having a problem. But they're very cognizant of the fact that employees need to take care of their mental wellness, and that's encouraged. And I think that if somebody, I know for me for sure, if somebody had a problem with an addiction and wanted to go to treatment, if they came to me, first of all, there would be no retribution or discrimination or anything like that. There'd be nothing but support. And I feel that we've come a long way in that I hope anyway. And it might just be the circle, the where I work and everything that I feel that way. But even my employer back in 1988, when they fired me, they knew I had a problem, and they told me that I could go to treatment. They offered me that. And I refused because honestly, I thought I can get this under control. I'm just going through a crazy phase.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, but you're
Just like Daryl in the movie. He kept
mhm,
trying to get it under control.
mhm.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right, Joanna. They wouldn't need to know, and they don't have to know because if you if you're going to go to treatment, your privacy is protected, HIPAA laws and all that kind of stuff. All they need to know that you're taking medical leave. They don't have to know why.
Right.
They absolutely do not have to know why. The insurance company might know and all that, but the employer doesn't need to know. You're absolutely right about that.
So another thing that struck me in this movie was that when he got out of rehab, that well, first he got it. I loved how he and the sponsor first met at the diner, and the sponsor was having milkshakes, apple pie, hamburger, whatever. I mean, it was like full blown sugar, and he was like, "What's wrong with you people? You eat like hogs," And then before he had 5 milkshakes himself on the first meeting with his sponsor, and the sponsor said, write your story. I want you to just write do an inventory. He had him do an inventory first, and then,
Mhm.
but the thing that I liked was his relationship with the sponsor. And the sponsor, when the movie first opens, there's a guy at an AA meeting talking about what it was like in his last days of drinking or using. And he said he would stand on the street, and every car that went by, he wondered if that was his guy behind the wheel. He was waiting for a delivery. And he
Mhm.
said he stood out there for hours, and he would stand there and go, "Is that him? No, no,
Yeah.
that's not him. But is that him?" And the waiting there for hours, just waiting and hoping that your delivery man was going to be coming. And and he knew about drugs, and so that he was a great sponsor for Daryl.
It's interesting that this movie, they were going to AA meetings and they were very specific about that, but they had problems with cocaine in addition to alcohol. And there seemed to be no problem with that in the movie. That you're an addict alcoholic and you're in AA, that was fine. But that's probably because when you think back in the 1980s, that cocaine was a big deal, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
absolutely. And he did it so well. Like he knew a little. I feel like the actor might have known a little something about cocaine,
yeah, probably did,
or he
probably
got
did.
instructions from somebody that was well versed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neil says that watching people do coke in movies is kind of triggering. It gives him the creeps. It doesn't bother him to see people drinking or smoking weed or anything, but
Mhm.
to see people
Yeah.
snorting, yeah,
And
yeah,
the way he did it, even when he was talking on the phone, it was just it was very creepy when he was in his addiction to me
hmm
personally. And then the thing that I loved was it was sort of old school before the internet, that his sponsor was waiting to take him out of rehab and take him home. And then the sponsor went with him to his apartment and helped him clean up because it looked like the last day he had been there, which was horrible and it was a mess. And he also said, "Where's your stash?" And so he knew where to look, and he helped him vacuum the corners of his drawers to make sure there was no coke in anywhere, and he helped him clean up. And I remember that from how in when I was in traditional AA prior to the internet, that sponsors were with their sponsees, that they were with them in person, helping them, and would be there waiting for you to go home from rehab and would help you clean your apartment and, do that sort of thing. And I don't know if that's still happening. Anybody else might be able to speak to that. I just don't see it as much these days.
No,
But
I know that there was a program called Bridge the Gap where districts would try to get volunteers of that would be ready on the phone. So if someone got out of treatment or out of jail, even I think you would be there to meet them when they get out, and then take them to a meeting. So they get to a meeting the first thing
yes,
they get
the
out. So they
first thing they
immediately
get
have
out.
a connection. Yeah. Bree said that she tried to quit smoking when she stopped drinking, but her doctor said, "No, just go ahead and just focus on not drinking. That's the main thing." That probably was good advice. I waited quite a while before I quit smoking, and quitting smoking was really difficult. I don't know if I could have done it at the same time that I quit drinking, although I've heard that that's what's actually recommended. But
Mhm.
she thought, Joanne, I agree.
Yeah,
No way would anybody have you do
no,
in my world,
no,
do a fourth step that like that at
right.
that early, before he even did steps 1 and 2. But
Agreed.
then
But
again, though,
he did ask him, "Are you an addict, Daryl? Are you an
yeah,
addict, Daryl?" That's kind of first step.
Yeah.
because Daryl didn't want to say he was. So he was
Yeah.
trying to get him to admit that he was addicted.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he thought he all just had these little pesky problems that he could handle.
And, I have a feeling that, there was a time before we got really fundamental about the big book that this process of working the steps, it wasn't so regimented, and you probably didn't have to read the doctor's opinion every day for 30 days before you could, move on with the steps or whatever. And maybe this represents that, but also in films, they have to kind of condense things down.
Yeah.
But it was a good exercise for him because at least it got him to think about something other than his urge to drink. We have a
Yes.
lot of comments in here.
Yeah.
Tony says, love boundaries, security. The program system does not promote this, but fear, conquer, divide. AA is a program for egotistical maniacs made by one. Yeah, we've talked about that before too. And someone actually wrote, Beth wrote that book about that. For the
People with low self-esteem.
yeah, to
Yeah.
work the steps for people with low self esteem.
Yeah.
Um, Oh my gosh, so many comments here. And then Bree says, of course, being a good actor for 24 years, but took me 10 years after I quit drinking. And then Neil says, I went to an old time 12-step call early on and we dumped hundreds of dollars on booze down the sink. Something just didn't seem right about that. Wow. Actually, I went on a lot of old fashioned 12-step calls early on. And I think it was my first 6 months that, a guy that had been sober for a long time took me on one, and we went to this guy's apartment, and I just sat there and watched while they were having this conversation, and I don't think the guy was ready, and I think that he was still drinking, but I remember that very clearly. But then I also had experiences where I did have to go to someone's house and take them to the hospital, and there was alcohol all over the place. In fact, on that particular 12-step call, it was really bizarre. I'll tell you what happened, Mary. This is a guy that I was sponsoring, and he was drinking vodka all day long in his apartment. And I think his wife called me, so I went over to his apartment with my sponsor, and we took him to the emergency room. But when I went there to get him, he had this bottle of vodka and he handed it to me, and I swear to God, my I had this almost an automatic urge. I came so damn close that it just seemed like I was ready to drink. It was so weird. And they always say and I've always heard people say that's why you should always go with someone else. But
Mhm.
I needed someone else just to carry this guy to the freaking emergency room too. But yeah, I did do a lot of that in my early days in the program, that kind of stuff. Not so much anymore. So many comments here. John says, I went to treatment 35 years ago. It was basically prep school for AA. It did work for me because I was ready to quit drinking. Yeah, that's what I understand that it all. Oh, what is a 12-step call, Joanna? Good
Oh,
question.
good.
I'm
Yeah.
just using the lingo. 12-step call means that you actually go and to help somebody. They might be drinking or hungover or whatever, and they want to stop. You actually go to their house and you share with them about AA and maybe take them to a meeting or something like that. And so that's what that is, where you go to someone's house. And it used to be that central office would sometimes call our group and they said, hey, we have a 12-step call at 75th Street. Can you send somebody over there? And they say, hey, anybody want to go 12-step call? And then you get in your car and you go, you
Right.
know, and that's how it used to work
Yeah. Before the internet
before
and
the internet.
before rehab took over the recovery system, that there were no rehabs, that people just went to people's homes
Mm-hmm.
when they made a call to the AA phone number.
Yep.
And then I, as a child, and y'all know my story probably, maybe not, but my parents were in AA. So I went with my mom on 12-step calls when I, throughout my childhood, they would get calls back then, even in the middle of the night. They would, you know, get calls and go to people's homes. And I just have memories as a child, whether it was, kosher or not, that I saw a lot of things. I saw, people with, in bed drunk with buckets on the side of the bed. And,
Mm.
one lady had tried to stick her head in the oven and,
God.
but that's what people did, because the 12-step is about service and the hand of AA being there if anyone needs it.
Right.
And so back in the day, that was taken very seriously. And so if you were on the service, say for the weekend, you were on call, then you went, if someone called, you either, most of the time they went to their house and talked to them about the first step. and then
Mhm.
told him where the meetings were and or took him to a meeting.
Yep.
And one of those 12-step calls that I went with my mom ended up being her best friend. The lady was her sponsee, but she was also like a second mother to me. So, a lot of things happened out of those 12-step calls, and that's how people did it back in the day.
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
know when that I think rehab sort of people just went into treatment. After a while, that became sort of the thing.
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting why I don't know if the 12-step calls probably don't happen as much anymore. One thing, and maybe it's just not that safe anymore, to
Oh,
do
right.
that.
Right.
I don't know, but I guess the last time I actually went on one was the 1990s.
Right.
Where I went to someone's house, and that was kind of weird. They called us over there like we were a medical team or something,
Right.
and we sat there and we talked to the guy, and he was totally, absolutely not ready.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
back to the movie. So Fred says that he thought Daryl's character had a love sex addiction issues also, the way that
Yes.
he pursued that woman.
Yes. We haven't talked about that yet either, but he did go from one addiction to another. Yeah, he did. He was ready for it, and there she was, and so
Yep.
that's where that went. And that look at what happened.
Yeah. As soon as he got in there, so he gets in there and he goes through detox for 2 days, and he's already looking at women. He's already, he's got the one woman, Iris, I think was her name, the character in there, who younger woman, he was hitting on, and then later on, Charlene, he was hitting on.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're right. He was transferring his from one thing to another like that.
Yes. And he
Yeah.
really got into it, and he pretty much substituted Charlene. Charlene became his drug of choice.
Hmm.
He was still trying to he was still trying to control and manipulate other people to do what he thought they should do.
Yeah.
So he still had that control thing going on and trying to make the world fit the way he wanted it to.
Still a few comments about 12-step calls. Dale mentions that many people used to carry a bottle in their car to
Mhm.
go on 12-step calls to help someone in case they're going to go into DTs.
Mhm.
And I actually remember there was a group I went to in Kansas City, Kansas. It was actually the first group in Kansas. And there are a bunch of old timers there. They've been sober they probably got sober in the 1950s or 1940s even. I mean, crazy amount of time, long time ago. And they would tell stories like that. And the AA hall where they were set up, this was called Shrine on the Hill for anybody in Kansas City, Kansas. It was called Shrine on the Hill. It was the first meeting in Kansas, and they used to have it was like almost like a detox center. So if somebody was new and they still need to be detoxed, they could detox right there. They also had a place like this. I'm just speaking locally because this is what I know in St. Joseph that I went to, where it was a beautiful old home, and it was an AA meeting. They'd have AA meetings there, but in the old times, in the 1950s, maybe even the 60s, people would dry out there as well. And yes, I remember they would say they actually had alcohol to help the people through that as
I never
well.
saw that, but I did see them pour a big glass of orange juice and put tablespoons of honey in it.
Hmm.
That's what I've seen people give alcoholics, that they would immediately, and they referred to that in the movie where you saw the one guy that was eating all the Hershey's chocolate kisses, and he had like millions of wrappers on the floor in
Yeah,
front of him. And then
yeah,
they were at the diner just eating, tons of sugar. And,
yeah.
in AA meetings, there's always donuts and coffee, so sugar is also something that's used
Hmm.
when you're sober and to get sober.
So anyway, so he's at this so he's we're kind of jumping around the movie a little bit. That's okay though. So when he gets in there, he gets into treatment. So he goes in there, he's not really serious about getting sober. He just wants to get the heat off. He doesn't really care about the program, not taking it seriously at all. Hitting on the women that he sees there that he likes. And then he's still trying to manipulate people on the outside to solve his problems. So he sneaks into his counselor's office to use the phone, which he wasn't allowed to do, and there's a little confrontation there. And Daryl was just, like, I can't believe that you wouldn't let me use your phone. He was just, out of his wits that somebody would say no, and that's what, and the counselor did say that's what an addict's least favorite word is, no, you know. But so he then he was going to leave treatment when there was another instance when he was using the phone when Charlene was given permission to use it. And
Right.
that was when Daryl, they said, you know what, you're not taking this serious. You need to go. And now this is the interesting. So when he gets out and he goes to his house, that's where the father of the girl who died put up the note on his door, on everybody, all the neighbors' doors and their
On their
cars,
windshields.
on their
Yeah.
windshields, that he killed their daughter by giving her drugs. And he saw that. And then he also, I believe, went to his office trying to, scrambling around to try to do something. I don't know what he's trying to do. And then the cleaning lady called the cops on him and he
Yeah.
had to leave there.
Mhm.
So things were just messed up. And so now he goes back to the treatment center again. But this time, I think not so much to get the heat off, but maybe there was no place else to go.
Mhm.
But he does begin to take it a little bit more seriously, I think, at that point.
Yeah. I think when he saw all those flyers calling him a murderer,
Hmm.
that was like his private life had become totally public.
Yeah.
And he I think that did kind of bring him to his wits' end. Yes. Yeah.
Neil points out that in the 1980s that the rehab industry kind of took over, and I do remember that there were a lot more treatment centers in the 1980s than we have now, and I think the insurance was easier to pay for like your 30-day stay in treatment or whatever. So there was a lot, and I think that they probably were all mostly 12-step oriented. But if there is a difference now, and I'm not an expert, but from some people I've talked to who work in that industry, it seems like now they are opening up to giving as 12-step programs as an option, but not the only exclusive way to approach your recovery. So there is a little bit of a difference now, which is good, that because not everybody needs to have the same program given to them. So
Agreed.
anyway.
There has to be more options.
Hmm. I don't know if he did, Joanna. I wondered the same thing. I think he just panicked and had to get out of there. But that particular scene, when I saw it for the first time back in '88, and I guess I just remember that movie. I just had so many emotions when I watched it the first time because I was going through that stuff, and so his life was just totally unmanageable. And not only that, other people knew it, and that's what I got me, is that other people knew it. I couldn't fool anybody anymore, and that's how I felt when he saw those notes all over the place. Now his entire neighborhood knows about him and his problems, and that was really, I think, if there was a bottom for me, Mary, it was that I was found out. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
is that the gig was up, I guess,
Right.
that
That
I
you
was
couldn't
confirmed.
that you the story that you'd been putting out there that you thought they were all buying, nobody bought it. They knew what was true. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
So anyway, so he does come back. He gets a little bit more serious with it. There's so many interesting things in this movie. So then they also show the dynamics between people and their families, and they have the family day in there. And the one of the main characters, Charlene, has a boyfriend. I guess his name is Lenny, and they have a totally dysfunctional relationship. And that's where you meet his character is during that day. Daryl didn't have anybody come in for family day, but he was observing, and he was interested in what he was seeing, and I think he was kind of surprised at what he saw as well with the interaction between Charlene and this guy.
Yeah. And he was already hooked into Charlene. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, he was
yeah,
already paying a lot of attention to what was going on there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
then and eventually he gets time out, and because he's doing well, and they give people time out, I guess, to go on treatment. Did he I can't remember, Mary, that he didn't that's not the point where he looked her up, is it, for the first time?
I
Or
can't remember.
maybe I can't remember if it was then or when they actually got out of treatment. But anyway, he eventually does start trying to pursue a relationship with
I
her.
think it was after he got out because
Yeah,
I
it was
remember
after
she
they
was
got out.
shocked. She was home because
Yes.
she wouldn't have been home the first time. Yeah.
Yep.
And when she opened the door, she was like, "What are you doing here?" Yeah.
Yes. And man, when the first time ever watched that movie, when I was in my first 30 days of sobriety, I didn't even pay attention to that part of the movie, that relationship. But now, as I watch it all these years later, I'm immediately thinking, no, 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 you do not need this. This is
Right.
not going to work out at all.
No, at all. No.
No. And she would have been better off left alone and dealing with
Yes.
her relationship on her own, because that was her environment, and
That
she
was her
was
environment. Yep.
and it was completely different from his world. They were in two completely different worlds. And he thought that he was going to be able to save her and rescue
Yeah.
her from that
Yeah.
life.
Right. But
Yeah.
that will never happen, and she hadn't dealt with her own codependent, addictive nature with her relationship with him. So she
No.
had a lot to get she needed to get well and not
Yeah.
go into a that's why they tell people, like, don't go into relationships until you're,
Mhm.
settled. She really needed to work on herself before she did anything other than, and it had horrible consequences.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I hope that they were stressing that in Daryl's treatment center.
I
But
don't think they were.
yeah. And Fred says, surprised at the storyline that Daryl didn't have to face more legal consequences for the death of the girl. But you never know. That the movie was just the first 30 days of his life.
Yeah,
And, when he was collecting his chip, he says, who knows what's going to happen the next 30 days or whatever.
right.
And maybe he would. But, as it turns out, it was probably just an overdose, and maybe he wouldn't have had any consequences
Right.
from it. I don't know.
But when he
But
got that chip, I was like, "God, all that happened in the first 30 days?" I mean, that was
yeah,
a lot.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot.
it
But I
was.
think he was like an adrenaline junkie. He was always gonna be, he was gonna have to channel his addictive nature into some other thing that would give him that same adrenaline rush that he had going in his life prior to
Yeah,
quitting. Yeah.
yeah. And again, I remember that my first 30 days was kind of like that too. I just had so much crap going on. I mean, from getting arrested to losing my job, losing my apartment, starting to go to AA meetings, and just everything was just crazy. It was just crazy. And it was so hard. I mean, all I wanted to do, Mary, was drink, and I wanted to drink and I didn't want to drink. It was just a
Yeah.
really, really, really
Yeah.
difficult time. And I did go to a lot of AA meetings at that time. I went like 4 times a day sometimes, but a lot of meetings.
Mhm.
But it was like, yeah, that movie was something else. And this is kind of off the subject a little bit, but Michael Keaton made another movie in 1988 that I also used to see. You know what it was?
No.
Beetlejuice.
Oh my god, that was the same year?
Hmm. And you know what's crazy is they were play okay, so I'm here, I am, this guy just getting sober, I have no job, I have no place to go, and they played Beetlejuice at the Dollar Movie in Kansas City, Kansas, and I would go to it and I would watch it repeatedly. I would seriously sit through one movie of it. Movie's done. I come out, buy another ticket, and watch it again. I might have done it 2 or 3 times. It's crazy. I saw that movie more times than any other movie in my life. And I was thinking about that, and it's interesting that I had this one movie that he made, Clean and Sober, that deals with reality, and I'm identifying with that movie and my own real life and my own circumstances. I had that going, but then his other movie, Beetlejuice, was complete escape.
Yeah, total.
I could
Yeah.
watch that movie, Mary, and just completely escape from all my problems. And I think that
Yes.
that's what I was doing then. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind
Wh
of
which was a great way to channel. That
uh-huh.
was a good way to channel, and to just be in recovery,
So
you
now I'm
know?
gonna have to watch Beetlejuice. But
I wanna hear what you think of it now that you see it now.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love that movie actually. It was a
yeah.
great movie. Okay, so what else comments do we have here? Do you know any women like silk or satin? I don't know about that.
Okay,
So,
I don't think that's what we're talking
that's
about here,
that's
Brock.
not in the movie.
No,
Fred said they say in the movie that the girl was the one that had the drugs. Yes, that's right. That's
the
right.
the
She
girl
brought
that
she
died.
brought the
Yeah.
drugs.
Mhm.
And Joanna says the police found the drugs in her purse. Okay, so that's why. That's why they didn't have anything to do with any legal problems. So anyway, there's that. Okay, so anyway, so where were we? So yeah, so that whole relationship thing wasn't going to work out,
And
and
he kept going
he
to her house, and he kept trying and then she would sneak out of her house and not tell her boyfriend and go hang out with him, and they were developing sort of a relationship, and he was basically, I feel like he was avoiding himself because one of the scenes in this movie prior to this was when he came back to his apartment with his sponsor. The sponsor cleaned it up, helped him clean it up and get rid of all his drugs and alcohol. And then he
Mhm.
was just sitting there, no one but himself in that apartment by himself, walking around smoking and thinking. And it was like the first time that he was really alone and didn't have a plan to go get drugs. Like he wasn't in the middle of a score or a using, and he was just alone. And then I think that sort of the next project for him was her, so that he couldn't just sit with himself in that apartment alone. It was like, the next thing I want is her, and I'm going to make that happen, and I'm going to do it I'm going to save her, and
And he
she's going to
kept
be mine. Yeah. And so I won't be alone.
and he kept calling her repeatedly over and over and over. And then she gets in the car. She's all upset. She starts doing coke and she gets in an accident and dies.
Right. She gets hit by car while she's doing coke.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that part of the storyline was really useful to show just how damaging
Oh,
those
yeah.
types of relationships can be, and how Daryl was completely unaware of what he was doing. Completely unaware, uh, and it was just the two were on different tracks. They each had to have their own recovery. They really did,
Oh, yeah.
and they had to handle it their own way.
Yeah.
And
And
they,
not being in a relationship and trying to control situations.
yeah,
Yeah, he was still doing the things he was doing, but without the drug,
he
just
was.
in a different way. Yeah, so it takes time. I mean,
It
it just takes
does.
time to unwind from all those habits and
Yep.
to,
Yeah.
but it was hard. It would be hard to just be alone,
Mhm.
fresh in recovery. And that's why the whole thing about being around people and not being isolated is so important.
Yeah.
Calling people, going to see people, all of that, just not be sitting in your apartment, because it's hard if it's hard for anyone in recovery or not that's not using, to just sit and be with yourself.
It's totally hard. It's very, very difficult. That was the thing with me that in the first 30 days was so difficult was, before I lost my apartment, was sitting there by myself. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I was going to ask you, Mary, how do you think AA was portrayed in that movie? How do you think they did a good job portraying AA?
I think they did a good job of portraying the AA that I knew back in the day,
Yeah,
in the 1980s version of it.
I think so too.
Yeah. And
I
I do
do.
think there was a point, Morgan Freeman was their sort of counselor, and
Hmm.
he had, like, they were all in a room, and that's when he told the one girl, he said, "Where did you get the stuff?" Because he could tell she was high. And he said,
Hmm.
"You either, kind of like fess up or get out." And so she got out, but it was sort of almost, that was group therapy, because they were all talking amongst themselves, sort of. It
Hmm.
wasn't really like an AA meeting. I don't think they showed like a,
Well, they did
except at the
speaker
podium,
meeting.
the
Yeah,
speaker meeting. Yeah, at
the
the
speaker
podium.
meeting,
Yeah,
and they did read how it works, but just they didn't read the whole thing that goes through the steps. But I
right.
I thought that was interesting. I saw the big book, and she read how it works to start to open the meeting, and um, yeah, actually there were two stories when they first opened the meeting. When they first started the movie, it was his sponsor giving a talk at the
Right.
podium talking
Yeah.
about his days, and then there was the meeting where he goes to find a sponsor, and then at the
Yeah.
end of the movie, the meeting he goes to get his chip, his
Chip.
30 days.
Yeah.
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 But I did think they did a good job. I mean, it was a typical type of speaker meeting back then with all the cigarettes and the smoke and everything. And then afterwards, when people were mingling around and he's just by himself.
Yeah.
And, I forgot to put the phone number up there for anybody who might want to call. There you go. Feel
Yeah,
free
he
to
was by
call.
himself, and that's when I think somebody said to him, "You need to get a phone number." I think his counselor said, "You need to get a phone number before you leave here."
Right.
Yeah. But I
You'll have a
remember
cough.
meetings. I went to a meeting in North Carolina one time, and that's where all the tobacco fields are. I mean, it was so thick with smoke that
Hmm.
it was almost like a haze was over the room to see other people. It was in a kind of a smallish place. And I do remember all the smoke in the meetings. Yep. It was intense.
Yes, it was.
Hmm.
Yeah. the portrayal of AA seemed realistic to me at the time. I was a couple of years sober when I saw the movie on VHS. That's cool,
Yeah.
John. Yeah, yeah, I did too. I mean, like I say, I going back in time, then it was pretty much comported with my experience. Um, I liked that sponsor a lot. I liked the way that he treated Daryl, and it was a good example, I guess, of sponsorship. It was more of a caring, kind of, equal,
Yeah.
relationship type thing, not one of these, I'm the boss and you're going to do what I
Right.
say type
Yeah. I'm
thing.
the sergeant and you're the soldier and you do what I say. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Neil says the smoking. I was one of them. Me too. Me too. It's so funny, when I was going to meetings and then I'd go to a meeting and go to work, I must have smelled like I came out of a bar or something,
Yeah.
because of all the smoke that was going on. But that's the way it was back then. And do you remember the how bad it was when the group started arguing about smoking and not
Yeah.
smoking?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Totally. And then it was like, well, you have to smoke outside. And so then people would smoke on the porch of where you had to walk into the building.
Yep.
And so you'd walk through a fog before you got it wouldn't be smoking inside, but you definitely get covered when you walked in. And then it got to be, well, you can't do it at the front right where people walk in. You have to do it further away. And we have an outdoor meeting here in Savannah in the park, and there are a lot of smokers. And we put in the preamble to please move away from the group if you want to smoke. Like you can't just smoke even though it's an outdoor park meeting
Hmm.
in the circle. You have to step farther, pretty
Oh
good
yeah. Oh yeah. Because
step
you
away
it's
so nobody's like breathing it,
absolutely, because it'll still
covered in
bother
it.
you.
Yeah.
Hmm. No, I remember the group that I went to was probably one of the last to have to stop smoking. They had their own building that they rented, and I guess they could smoke if they want to. But no, I think the city changed law that they wouldn't even be able to do it anyway. Anyway, at first they tried to divide the room up without a wall or anything, where this side of the room smokes and this side of the room doesn't smoke. Well, the smoke just goes everywhere, so that didn't work. But then the groups voted that no smoking, and there was like a civil war. And there was one guy, I swear to God, I think he's ready to hit me over it. I mean, I just never seen anything like it. I was on the anti-smoking side, or the not
Yeah.
the stop smoking side, and he was on the smoking side, and it was crazy. But but now you don't smoke anywhere in
Right.
any
It
AA
just goes
meeting.
to show how life evolves,
Hmm.
how things
Yep.
change, how things that we
Yep.
used to take as normal are not.
Yep. And Neil says, and now some meetings make you go across the street. Yep. Same here. Exactly. There's a place outside the group in Kansas City where they can smoke outside the church. But even then, the church will, if they see cigarette butts on the floor, on the ground or whatever, will say something to them. So it's a different world for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so yeah, the portrayal of AA I thought was pretty good. Yes, he was kind of doing the steps, like that. The inventory step was a big one. And he was even suggesting to Charlene that she do that. Um, then at the end of the movie, when he's giving his talk, and he's just basically, you know, that's when he just, it was a long 30 days for him to get to the point where he goes into rehab just to run away from everything, to where he gets up on the stage and admits and recognizes that he's an alcoholic and an addict. And you know that that's any of these addiction movies, that part of the movie always gets me, when they finally realize for themselves, that they have a problem. And I like that scene. I
Mhm.
like that scene. I like that scene when the first time I saw the movie. I like that scene.
It's to finally quit lying to yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah. To finally realize, wow, this is what it is. Um, and so Bobbert says a sign that I was getting comfortable with myself was when I could sit and my foot was not tapping.
Yeah, I was like that too. I was a tapper.
Hmm.
And John says, in California, smoking ended pretty early in my sobriety. I do remember those smoking meetings. Yeah, I'm sure
And
that California.
I remember your job would be to dump the ashtrays. You know,
Yes.
there were people whose whole job, and there would be coffee cans full of buds. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah. I cleaned ashtrays in my day, made the coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There was some hope for Daryl. It's hard to say what was going to happen his next 30 days or next 60 days down the road. Um, that's the thing about that's what's so hard about getting sober in the beginning is your life still has to catch up with you. All that stuff that happened when you were drinking has to still play out,
Oh,
and sometimes it takes a year or two to for all that stuff to kind of work itself out, and sometimes it maybe even longer depending on whatever your
and
problem
it takes
was.
longer. It takes a while to begin to trust yourself
Yeah.
that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and then for other people to trust you,
Mhm.
because once they maybe they did or maybe they didn't find out what happened, but there could be a lot of lies that happened and that people knew about.
Yeah.
And so all of that takes time for people to see if you really have changed.
Yeah. Neil wants to know how the churches put up with all that smoking. That is funny. There was actually a church in Kansas City, and it was on the Kansas side that threw the AA group out because they started a fire
Oh my
in
god.
their meeting room. I guess
Wow.
they were throwing the ashes in the trash can, and there must have been some hot
Right.
ones in there, and it started a fire, and that they threw the AA group out.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
So
glad
they
that that's not a part of it now.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So, well, are there any other comments about this movie? I think I'm kind of running out of things to say about it. I still have a
Yeah.
bit of a cold. I don't know if you can tell, but this cough just having a hard time with it. I'm just wanting to cough. But yeah, it'll just takes time, I guess.
Well, I liked this movie. I think Michael Keaton did a great job. It affected me, but I think the first movie that ever really affected. Well, I was already sober by the time I saw it, but I liked Leaving Las Vegas.
Mhm.
That was hard for me to watch. But there's a lot of new ones when I was watching this that say if you like this movie, you'll like this one. There's so many new ones now that deal with it that maybe next time we do a movie, we can do a more current one.
Yeah, let's do. Let's
Yeah.
definitely do. There are some good ones. I'm amazed at how many good addiction movies there are
Yeah,
out there.
I'd love to see one I haven't seen yet.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
thank you, Frank. I'll get some some cough drops, I think, after this live stream. But yeah, I like all those addictions movies. I
yeah,
don't know. I'll tell you one other thought that I had, Mary, that I don't know. I just started thinking about this. So I know someone that when they were younger, they had problems with alcohol and they were able to quit, but they didn't have to go to AA all their life. They weren't in recovery like forever. And I don't know, sometimes that wasn't me at my journey. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I really needed the extra help. And I guess that, I guess I was asking myself, why couldn't I have done that? But it just, I couldn't. I needed the help.
yeah. I well, I it was never an option for me to not do it once I decided that I had a problem.
Uh-huh.
I never thought I'm not going to do this. I don't know. But,
Right.
like I have someone in my family that got sober 5 years before me and didn't I mean, went to AA for like maybe a year, but then
Mhm.
never did again and still sober to this day over 30 years and but doesn't go to AA and never did. And I've talked to him about it. He's a very close family member and I've said, you God, I just in my mind I see how going to meetings would be great, that he would love
Mhm.
it, but that
Mhm.
just hasn't been his path. He just doesn't he's done it without going to meetings. And I don't
Yeah.
know how he does it, but he does.
Mhm.
I just think
Yeah.
for me personally, it's great to have a community of people like you that I can talk to online or talk to anybody here at the meeting online. And I always have ready-made group of people that I can relate to wherever I go. So I really love the community aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's
I
been
don't
a
have any
great,
regrets. I don't
yeah,
have any regrets, and I have gotten to a point where I have pretty decent balance in my life anyway now, so that, I don't feel like it's, like, totally, absorbing my life or anything, but
right.
it just gave me some pause. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, the last, 3 decades or so that I've been sober, and, how important just being part of a recovery community has been to me during this entire time, and how my sobriety and my recovery has always been pretty much up and front and center, you know, um, it's something that if I'm not thinking about it immediately, it's always in the back of my head. I mean, it's something I just always carry with me, and probably for the good because I'm careful, I guess, but that's just that's just me, I guess,
Yeah.
that's how it turned out. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing. I mean, the whole point I think is to just not be using that your drug of choice,
Mhm.
you know.
Neil's pointing out on that fifth step that when he was doing it, that Daryl mentioned all the trivial stuff, and then he mentioned that he stole tens of thousands of dollars.
Right. And then he eventually he goes, what about the $92,000?
Mhm.
He kind of put that under the rug when he was mentioning all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he ever was able to pay that back.
No, I doesn't look like it, but it was funny when he did go into his office and they were sitting in the boardroom all around the table and he was trying to make amends
Mhm.
and it just came out like such bullshit when he
I
first did
know.
it. And everybody knew it was total and he was still bullshitting. He
It
was
was
still bullshitting.
it
Yeah.
was too early for him to be making
Yeah.
amends.
No, he
Um,
thought he was just going to go in there and control the situation and it would go back to normal.
mhm.
He was still doing that. Yeah.
Fred, yes, some treatment centers are dealing are offering harm reduction for certain types of addictions and certain types of people in different situations. I don't completely understand all of that stuff, but yes, they are. And I did a podcast with Confidant Health, and they do that. They do that as well. It's just all about meeting somebody wherever they are, and helping them from that point. And so yes, they are, that is happening, I think, now more often than not. So I don't know a lot about that, but I do know that goes on.
So
Well,
what do you think if you could imagine how Daryl's life turned out, where do you see his life? Like what would
okay.
how would he have turned out, do you think?
Well, I think that this is how I think it would have been. I think he would have stayed sober. I think that he would have had a really hard time that first year or two. He would have, he'd probably have to take jobs that were not where he wasn't making as much money as he was before. He'd probably have to get a different place to live. Hopefully he would go to a lot of meetings and make friends there. He hopefully he would learn not to pick up women in the meetings, and I
Yeah,
think he would. And so I think that he would be on a good track. But the next year or two are not easy for
no.
sure. They weren't for me, and I think for a lot of people, there's just a lot of adjustment that goes on during the first couple of years, of just getting your life together. And you talk to people that are married, and just learning how to have a relationship with their spouse as a sober person, just so much there's so much to do. So
So much to
yeah.
do. But I
Yeah.
think he would have I felt that he was so smart and he had such a um he was a good communicator. And I feel like I'm hoping he would have gotten sober, stayed
Hmm.
sober, been in a community of recovering people. And then, once his family started believing in him again, and he would have gotten all of that, I think he would have been successful in whatever career he chose. And I think it would have probably had something to do with adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
Like he would have been like, like a river rafter or something like that. That was a constant adrenaline rush to keep up with that side of himself that liked that
Hmm.
sort of thing. Yep.
Hmm.
Or some high powered, quick paced
Yeah.
job.
But you're right, Frank. Dr. Bob in the old days, they would have you do all that stuff just as fast anyway. So absolutely true. And yes, Neil, there are free movies. I don't know if they're legal or not, but if you could Google a movie like clean and sober movie free, and you will find one. So I found one for him, and he was able to watch it. And I know that YouTube has a lot of stuff too. Oh, I'm glad, Fred. I'm glad that you liked this discussion. I feel like I'm ready to cough every minute or
Well,
so. So
we're good.
yeah,
We're talked out.
I think that we'll probably kind of wind it down now. But I do enjoy these live streams so much. We'll come up with another topic for next week. I really enjoyed, Mary, the one that we did last week on relapse. That was so good. Did,
Well,
did you?
sometimes we're in the flow and it flows and it's
Oh,
good.
that was just awesome.
Yeah.
That's one I'm going to put out on a Wednesday podcast episode here pretty soon, because that was such a good subject, and I love the way that we had the interaction on that one. And
Mhm.
Bobbert, therapy was going to end someday, so I started going after 4 years. That's right. I think that Bobbert mentioned before that they went to therapy before they started going to meetings.
Yeah, true.
Yep.
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 Yeah. But
All
it's good.
right.
I like that at relapse too. It's always good to talk about where the addiction goes after we put down the initial thing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be another good. Maybe that's for next week. We can have a discussion more about that, about where our addiction moves from one thing to the next. If
Hmm.
you'd like to do that, we can. It's
Yeah,
something to think
and
about.
it's sort of today's reading in the Beyond Belief Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life
Hmm.
talked about that.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
All right, everybody. I'm going to shut it down. Thank you once again for being here. Um, that's the wrong one. I messed up. There we go. Oh, I'm going to get some cough drops and kick back, have some water. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back again next week.
Bye,
Take
y'all.
care.
See you next week.
Bye bye.